Good morning, Jerry. Welcome to the podcast. How are you doing today?
I'm doing fantastic, David. I appreciate you having me on today.
Well, my pleasure. So, where are you calling in from today? What part of the world are you in?
The big metropolis of Indianapolis, Indiana.
Ah, well, one of your suburbs, I think, has the most roundabouts of any city in the country. Carmel? Is it
Yes,
Carmel? Carmel? Carmel?
Carmel,
Carmel?
Carmel in California and Carmel in Indiana, just like
Exactly.
the candy you would eat.
Sure. Have you been through any of those famous Carmel roundabouts?
Actually where I live, Carmel, Fishers,
Ah,
Noblesville. It's the city, sister cities of roundabouts. Yes, I actually like them. At first, I was like, "What is this?" But actually, it moves traffic and it's efficient as long as the people in front of you know understand.
yeah, I actually heard a podcast with like the mayor of Carmel because something like Carmel accounts for like more than 50% of all the roundabouts in the US. It's a crazy number. And he was talking about all the benefits. And he said the only drawback, he said there's a few times during the day, like at peak traffic times, where it's arguably a little less efficient. But he said the other 23 and a half hours a day, it's far more efficient because you never have to wait for a stoplight. And he
That
talks about if you ever been driving in the middle of the night and you come up to a stoplight and there's no traffic within a mile any direction, but technically you're supposed to wait for the light to turn.
that is correct, technically.
Technically, correct. I find when if it's 3 o'clock in the morning, I ask myself, have I had any drinks this evening? And if I have, then I'm going to wait for the light to turn. And if I hadn't
Amen.
had any drinks that night, then how much trouble can I get into?
That is exactly right. I do the same thing. I'm like, well, there's nobody anywhere. This light, you sit there, it feels like it's been 10 minutes, probably been a couple, but I'm like, really? Why am I sitting here at a stoplight?
I know. So are you a native of Indiana?
I am. I was actually born in Hoopeston, Illinois, but we grew up in a western city in Indiana. So almost to the
Okay.
Illinois border, but I've grown up as a Hoosier most of my
Okay.
life.
Nice. Nice. So let's get into your business. So
Okay.
the name of the company uh, resonated with me immediately because there's a character in one of my all-time favorite books by the name of John Galt, and there's a famous phrase from the book called "Who is John Galt?" Now, is this just coincidence, this J Gault, or is there any connection?
Well, I'm glad that you brought that up because it doesn't stand for Jerry Galt. I can tell you that, right? So we couldn't use John Galt because it's obviously patent and has a huge following, but it is off the premise of the book Atlas Shrugged by Ayn Rand. So who is John Galt? The whole story of the government takeover of small business and controls and regulations and all of that in that book that was written by a Russian immigrant that understood communism, came
Sure,
over
she
in the
saw it
late
first.
1940s, and she said, what is going on? So I'm seeing the same stuff right here. So she wrote that fictional book in the 50s, as you know, but it's kind of a big deal and it's coming out and there's a big following and people get it. But yeah, you're exactly right. It is John Galt.
So it's probably actually not a bad filtering process because I find that there's three types of people in the world. There's people who've read Atlas Shrugged and think it's one of the greatest artistic works of all time. There's folks who've read it and think she's the devil and it's the worst thing ever written. And then there's folks who've never heard of it. So I find that people tend to fall in one of three camps. There's not many people that are like, yeah, I think I read it. I think I vaguely remember something about it. So it's probably a good self-selection process, right? Because the people who read it and think it's the most evil book ever written probably aren't the mindset of your ideal customer, I'm guessing. Is that probably
It's pretty
right?
close, right? It's surprising at how many people know, even myself, as we name the company, your reticular activation system in your head, just like when we buy a car, right? And then after we buy a
Right.
car, you start driving around like, man, look at all the people that bought the car I have. This is great. People
Exactly.
are following my lead. Now they were already there. I see who is John Galt stickers on the back of bumpers and on the back of their windshield. It blows me away, but you're exactly right. most of the entrepreneurs, because we are working only with Main Street business owners, okay, small and medium-sized companies, not the Wall Street companies. So those are the people we're serving, and most of them, all of us that own businesses and have done that, get the challenges and the works, and we're just trying to do the best we can to serve the communities and then build a profitable and a great company with our services or products.
Sure. No, I like it. So her book, The Fountainhead, I have a slight preference for. Like, I mean, they're my two favorite books, fictional books ever written for sure. But I have a slight preference for The Fountainhead, but only because the individualistic aspect. I assume you've read The Fountainhead too.
Yes.
The individualistic aspect of The Fountainhead just resonates a little more. There's a great line in there where Rourke has to sell an architectural commission to a committee, and the committee all wanted to make changes to it, and his sponsors, like, they're minor, go for it. As you recall, he like can't do it, but he had a great line in there where he was talking, I think, to his buddy, his Irish construction buddy, explaining why he didn't get it. And he said, I've never sold a project to a committee. And that really resonated, because that's how I've always been in my career. It's like, if I meet the entrepreneur and I have a conversation and it's a fit, good things happen. But when it's a committee, I don't seem to have much luck.
I'm glad you brought it up. It's one of my favorite things. And that's when it's amazing. I agree with you. Both those books are in my top favorite fictional books ever written. But I think there's a lot of great content, especially for the entrepreneur, of what you have to do. I mean, if you're not a disruptor, if you kind of stay under a ceiling and you're like, hey, I'm not going to change where you're, I don't know what your thoughts are, but I kind of say that if you're an entrepreneur, a successful entrepreneur, normally you're kind of a freak, right? You're looked at as a freak in the industry. And I think that's well put on the committee. I'm not here to appease the committees. I'm here to disrupt the industry on how Main Street business owners will get funding, not just through how the traditional style is. So that's not our cup of tea. So I think the whole Atlas Shrugged and Fountainhead, even though they're fictional books, there's a lot of great content, and I think some kind of rules of engagement for the entrepreneur.
Yeah, I was just before this, I had a call with a colleague, and he really had very little familiarity with Ayn Rand's work and barely heard of it. So he had just bought the Audible for Fountainhead. So I'd recommend you start with Fountainhead. So we'll see how that goes.
That's excellent.
So talk to me. So what are you guys doing to help those, privately held, closely held, you call them Main Street businesses? What's kind of your sweet spot revenue wise? I get it's probably a broad one, but like for us, like 90% of our clients have revenues between 10 million and 100 million. Like, what's kind of your sort of sweet spot where most of your clients fall in?
I'd say 250,000 to 450 million a year.
Okay.
So I know you're saying,
what if you had to narrow it down a little bit? And so
here's why
go ahead.
Our sweet spot today, David, is probably somewhere in that, I'm going to say 10 to 25 million is our sweet spot. When you get to the 100 and 250 million dollar companies, they do have a lot of cash flow, and they've got profits, and they've got banks that give them lines of credit, even though they're personally guaranteed. So it's a little harder to get in the door, but we're getting in the door with those now, and they're seeing what's going on. But our sweet spot today would be that 10 to 25 million.
Okay, that is helpful. And the reason I narrowed you down here is because our audience, who CPAs and attorneys who have clients, when you say 250,000 to 450 million, it doesn't quite resonate. When you say 10 to 25, now all of a sudden they can think of their clients who are in the 10 to 25 range. Yeah. So talk to me, and you kind of touched on it. Talk to me about this whole personal guarantee thing, and there's probably, I'm guessing, some history behind it. So what's the story, and talk to me about this personal guarantee thing.
Yeah. So when we say we're disruptors, and I just want to make sure that your audience understands, the 250 to 450, when you look at your EIN, that tax number that you get from the IRS, that's
Yeah.
just like your SSN to building personal credit. Your EIN can build company credit. Your company
Okay.
has its own credit score and its own report, and so does your personal Social Security number. So when I
Okay.
give that broad scope just for your audience, you get someone that's just starting out, whether it's a startup or they're cranking out 20,000 a month. It just gets hard to try to get funding without what? Bank revenue statements, tax
Right.
returns, business plans, revenue, looking at your personal credit, just to try to get the operating budget to be able to run your company and then to
Yep.
grow and scale and seize opportunities to grow and scale. Because we all know as entrepreneurs that when you have an opportunity in front of you, it's not like you can plan and then just hits exactly when it happens. When you need to seize an opportunity, you don't have 60 to 90 days to qualify for it.
Sure.
So we look at what J Gault's main premise is and our advantage and really how we impact that entrepreneur in the world is what we do is we focus on the EIN, and to build credit on that, it's actually very simple, has nothing to do with revenue, has nothing to do with what your financials, your tax returns, or how long you've been in business. It's just about taking that tax number and making it fundable so you can get access to corporate vending and lending. And your
Okay.
rates are typically 0 to 5%. I mean, we're getting people vehicle and equipment loans at 1.9%. Corporate credit cards are 0% on 3 to 12-month terms, right? Not just on balance transfers. So that's the power. That's how your Walmarts and Googles and Amazons and your Apples of the world are able to do what? You and I, David, have no problem with paying interest as long as it's a positive arbitrage. What we can't do is pay 30 to 50% in interest when we're only making 25 to 35% in money.
Sure.
So
Sure.
how you flip the script is you got to get access and get your company fundable so you can get access to banks' monies to leverage that at better rates and terms so you can grow and scale without going into what? Debt risk or paying too much in interest where it's not a profitable proposition. We see that every day, and I know you do, David, right? People get in these small little bridge loans, and if they don't get them paid off, they'll come
Right.
out and foreclose on your mortgage.
And then the other aspect of it then is when the underwriting is done on the company's EIN, there's less of a need for personal guarantee, right? Because they're underwriting
Correct.
the business.
Typically, that doesn't even come into play. Your credit score, your personal inquiries, or what your credit score looks like, that has nothing to do with building company credit. Company credit is vanilla. It doesn't matter if you're a man or a woman, you're a Democrat or Republican, what your religion is, because it's a tax number. There's no bias on that number where that can come into play on your personal credit, right? When you walk into a bank, but it
Sure.
doesn't have that when you're looking at a company's index because a company is not a man or a woman or a Democrat or Republican or a certain type
Right.
of. It's where your Social Security is tied to an individual. Your EIN, that tax number, is tied to the company.
Okay. Well, that sounds good. And is the motivation for your customers trying to get rid of the personal guarantee or trying to get better interest rates on borrowing?
Most of the time, they get tired of the personal guarantee business, right? You're married, your wife's like, you're not putting the house on the line, right?
Exactly.
So if you want money, they always have you check a box and do a little initial where, hey, we're going to give you the money because we believe in you and you believe in your business. We just need you to check the box. And this is just a what? This is just a normality. But if something would happen, we know that's going to happen. If something would happen, you understand the bank's right, since we're giving you money, is we'll have access to your 401ks, your kids' college funds, your second home, your cars, your current home, your family's living underneath. That's
Right.
just a technicality. So a lot of them want to get out of the personal guarantee business, or they don't grow and scale because they don't want to risk tying up their personal assets to leverage to their company's funding. So that's the first thing. But getting corporate capital on your EIN, you're going to get 10, 20, 30, 100 times the amount of money on your company than you're ever going to get on your SSN, because you're only going to stretch that personal credit bubble so far, because then they're looking at underwriting risk on you personally. They
Right.
look at the company's revenue, but the company has nothing to do with it. If you don't have a corporate credit, they're always going to look at your EIN first, but there's usually nothing there. So they always revert what? Back to revenue, bank statements, underwriting risk, AR balances, invoicing. So there's a lot that goes into that. So you can see how
Sure.
complex that gets and how it can what? Limit you on getting and seizing opportunities. And then more importantly, getting better rates in terms of run the operation so you can leverage the bank's money. Because David, you and I get this, right? I'd rather use the bank's money than my money. I'd rather take my money and put it in vehicles that does what with my money? Grow
Yeah,
it.
exactly. No, that no, that really makes a lot of sense. So what's the disruption you're doing is basically bringing this Wall Street credit access to Main Street businesses. Is that
Yep.
kind
Education, right? First thing we do is I always ask an owner, I said, hey, what's your personal credit score? And they always answer, right? 720. What's your company's credit score? What do you think I get most of the time?
right? No idea.
I
What
have
are
no
you
idea,
talking about?
right? So we have a 7-step blueprint, but we're all about education. We're not here to sell anything. We're here to serve. So just like in the whole Atlas Shrugged with J Gault, John Galt, right? We're here to serve and connect with people and give them education on things that they don't know. It's not the CPAs or the accounting firm's fault. It's not the bankers. It's not the tax attorneys. That's not their job of what they do. What J Gault does is we do the same thing. People understand personal credit. They just don't understand company credit and how easy it is to get there. There's just a secret set of rules. So our job is to educate you on the 7-step blueprint of how you can get your company fundable. So you as the owner can survive storms, right? You don't have to worry about the 4 things that can take the legs out of a business. Economy. You and I, do we have control over economy, David?
Nope.
How about inflation?
Nope.
Does that impact us?
Sure.
Sure it does. How about a government regulation?
No control.
And I'll give you a great
Almost no
example.
control. I mean, in theory, if you're part of a lobbying group, you might, but very little. And what's
Very
the
little.
fourth one?
Yeah. But and
What's
then
the
you're
fourth
going
one?
to have some capital to have some of these lobbyist groups, right? They're not
Sure.
free.
Sure.
And then the second thing is just you ever, I don't know if you've ever experienced one of these at all, David, but you ever heard of a pandemic?
I think I have. I think we had one of those like 100 years ago. I
Yeah.
heard about it.
Yeah.
1918, I think we had one.
Yeah. I think it was. If we had anything close, I know you and I have never experienced one of those lately, right?
No, no,
But
that'd be
even on that
crazy.
can cripple a business. Some it's a lot of businesses actually did a really great job. But
Sure.
there's a lot that it really affected. There's over, 60% of business haven't even made it back to pre-pandemic revenues today because
Sure.
they raised the prices, inflation's there. I mean, you got a lot of things going against you. So how do you survive that and how do you get through those things? How do you prepare for the storms and survive the storms? And it's really about if it makes sense for the business on you moving forward and getting to the goals or solving the challenges, but it's really about getting fundability on your company. That's the answer to that question or challenge. It's the most vexing problem with small and medium-sized business today is getting cash flow.
Okay. So I love stories. I think they educate well. Do you have a story or two of like a client of yours that you could talk about anonymously,
Yeah.
and maybe kind of set up what their scenario was before they met you? What's their scenario like now? Any
Yeah.
that come to mind?
Yes. We have a guy that's in the contracting business out of North Carolina. We'll call him Randy. Okay.
Okay.
But he came to us and we actually approached him and we had a conversation, but he's been in business for almost 8 years, doing well, has access to his local Chevy dealer, his local bank where he deposits his money. And his credit score wasn't bad. He said, oh, I know how to do this. I have a Dun and Bradstreet number, right? That's the largest credit bureau, like TransUnion is on our consumer side. Dun and
Sure.
Bradstreet is on the business credit side because there's business credit reporting agencies and there's personal credit reporting agencies, right?
Okay.
Well, personal credit reporting agencies has nothing to do with your company. It's the business credit reporting agencies that have everything to do with your company. So that's another tip that I'll give your viewers out there and listeners today, right?
Okay.
So, but with Randy, as we were having the conversation, David, he understood it, but he really didn't, because where he was going and putting his deposits in, he just thought this the way it was. And he actually was doing pretty well. He had a credit line recommendation about 67,000 on his company when we ran his company credit report. After 4 months and just getting his EIN fundable, the same Chevy dealer that he's been buying his vehicles for the last 8 years, he's been getting anywhere between a 9 and 15% rate.
Wow.
After 4 months with J Gault and focusing on his company EIN, that tax number, he walked into the same Chevy dealer and got his lowest vehicle rate, bought a $51,000 van for 1.9% interest rate.
Wow.
And that's impactful. He looked at me and goes, Jerry, I can buy 5 of these vans now instead of just 1 at a time, right? Because that interest rate is so impactful. So it's just about, he's still going to pay interest, but 9% or 1 or 2%, which one's better for a company, right?
Sure.
So that's one success story. And that was just after 4 months of, it's all intentional work. It doesn't take a lot, by the way, just so if you're asking, it only takes 2 to 3 hours a month to do this. I didn't say a day or a week, per month,
Okay.
but it's like going to the gym, David. I mean, you're a healthy guy, right? You can sign up for a membership. Just because we're paying for a membership at the gym, do we get 6-pack abs and do we get a healthy heart just because we pay a membership for a gym?
Unfortunately not.
Or is there a thing you just take 3 pills a day and you can get physically healthy?
There you go. That's what I'm looking for.
Yeah, that's what we're selling today. We're living an immediate gratification world, right? We want food today. We got DoorDash. We want same day shipping. We want our stuff today. And that's the world we live in. But to get access to that, it does take the hustle and muscle. It doesn't take a lot, but you're going to have to do the work. It's just like taking a walk every day for 30 minutes is so good for our health and our heart. And it's hard for us to find time to schedule it. But just like this, you have to put in the work if you're going to get your company financed and funded, right? So that's one story. Second story is we have a real estate investor, okay, down in Texas. Okay. And he's been in business for over 20 years. I mean, he's a Texan. I mean, you know, Texas, I mean, it's the Republic of Texas. I mean, it's its own country. I mean, you know what I'm saying there, right?
I do.
Yeah. I know you have some clients down there as well. So when I look at Texas, this guy had really a big ego, been doing a great job, very successful. He has over 105 properties. Okay. So he's a big deal. Okay. I'm not going to mention his revenue because someone might tag him or understand who he is. So he came to us and he couldn't get funded. And he thought our program was full of it, right? He says, this is just sounds too good to be true. I've been doing this. I've got bankers. I've got a fractional CFO. I've got this figured out. I don't see your help. So then we got into asking about personal credit and company credit, his company's credit score. And he thought he had a good company credit score. So we ran the report, went through it. Here's the thing. He had some blemishes, but here was the big problem on fundability. He'd been in business for 20 years and moved to a lot of different locations and had filled out a lot of paperwork. We're all busy. When you're an entrepreneur and you got over 100 properties, I mean, you're busy. You got a lot of stuff going on. So he would have filled out the Dun and Bradstreet and he put WM period. With the Secretary of State, he was listed as William. Well, you and I know that WM period and William mean the same thing as humans.
Right.
When a computer cross-references WM period and William, what does it see? A mismatch, and it's an automatic decline. He also didn't have his phone number. Listen to this, folks. Your phone number can't be a cell phone number. It has to be a landline or a VoIP service. Now, the VoIPs can be what? It can be transferred to your cell phone. And that number, David, let me ask you a question. When's the last time you used 411 or your area code in 555-1212 to look up a business number?
30 years.
Do you know if your business landline or VoIP number is not registered with 411 National Directory, it's an automatic decline for corporate funding?
I did not know that.
So that's another secret rule. So this is some education that Dave and I are providing to you. Just things like that, having a website or landing page, having a corporate email address. Your number has to be listed. You have to have a business bank account. There's just a little thing. And why is that? Folks, over 80% of small businesses fail in the first 5 years because of cash flow. Well, if you don't look like a real company, you don't have the phone number, you don't have the business bank account, merchant services, you don't have a corporate email, if it's a PO box, you can't use a PO box. Well, I have a UPS store, David. It's a fancy PO box. It's still a place where you don't live and they can't access you. So a home address can be used, even though I don't recommend it, because now they'll know where your family lives and sleeps in the whole entire world. But you can do things and get systems and processes put in place. It's all about fundability on the company, no different than you are personally. It's just a lot easier to get personal credit because there's over 4 million people using it to finance their lifestyle. However, on businesses, they tell us that we can be protected from lawsuits as a limited liability corporation, and we'll get funding. Here's the only problem. We never signed up for the credit bureaus that report our business payments so we can build fundability with the corporate debtors and vendors, right? No one told us that. So when you go to deposit your money in the bank, David, what happens? They try to get you money. They look at your EIN. They just said, hey, here's a business credit card, or we can get you a line of credit, but we just need you to do what with it? Personally guaranteed.
Sure.
So you got to get it fundable, and you got to find lenders and vendors that report. And this Texan, okay, that once we got his name right, got his phone number listed, and he had a couple blemishes that he wasn't aware of, we were able to get him all of these commercial real estate loans with no guarantors, not leveraging his other properties. He was able to get corporate millions of dollars in corporate in less than a year, all on his company now, which is a couple fundability rules and a couple secrets that he wasn't available on how to turn his company in standing on its own two legs financially, just by the fundability rules, the corporate credit bureaus, and using vendors to report and lining it up so he can get access to the same things he was doing now, but he was personally guaranteeing everything, leveraging his own properties or his name to continue to grow his real estate company.
Yeah. And I imagine, does that also mean that in theory, if he wanted to, if each project, if he wanted to have as a separate entity, he could avoid that cross-collateralization issue? Because that's the other problem I understand there is that, all 105 of those properties are all cross-collateralized. So if he has one project that somehow just goes belly up or property, that it risks the other 104 properties.
Correct. And if you get it on your company, then it doesn't put that into play, because when you're using personal credit, they're always going to leverage those, because you're putting those other properties as the guarantee against the loan for that new property. If it does go belly up or doesn't do as well as you thought, and that happens, right? When you're in real estate, I mean, most time you have wins, but there are losses. You don't have to put your other properties in jeopardy or do those things on corporate credit. It's no different than if you guys remember Donald Trump, right? He opened up that huge casino, used $3 billion of the bank's money, and then after 2 years it failed. I don't think Donald Trump wants anything to fail. He doesn't invest in things having to fail. Just didn't work out because of economy, location, and where the world was at the time. Well, he was able to walk away from that. Did it affect his personal credit?
Nope.
Did he have to give up any of his personal assets in that deal?
I doubt it.
No, 2 weeks later, he bought a golf resort in Doral, Florida, right? So without affecting anything with that. So that's the power of corporations. No different than, I'll tell you another story. Remember Home Depot and Lowe's and LA Fitness, right? Those are all Wall Street corporations, right? Stock held, stock owned, and all of that. During the pandemic, they were able to be open. You can only have 50 people in the store.
Right.
They were able to do that. But what about the local hardware guy in town? They had to be shut down. The local mom and pop fitness place, they had to be shut down. So there's a difference. And that's why we talk about this, J Gault. We're here to give the power and advantage back to the Main Street business owners by building fundability so their corporation has the cash flow, the access, because this is all about getting ready access, cash and capital for you to take on those storms, to survive those storms, and to grow and scale. Walmart, Sam Walton, would not have been the world's largest retailer if he didn't figure out corporate credit. He would still be in Bentonville, Arkansas, if that was the case. So now, obviously, then he went public as an IPO, so that made it a world difference for him to get there, but he would have never got to that position if he wasn't able to scale that, take advantage of the back in the 80s. You remember when he took down Kmart. right? But it was through cash capital and corporate funding that allowed him to do the advertising and get belly up and take on the big giant. Now he's the big giant. So just consider that just because you're labeled a small business owner doesn't mean you have to be small. What if you wanted a franchise? What if you wanted to grow and scale? What if you wanted to buy your own property and land and build your own manufacturing facility, get bigger into the corporate real estate market, be a truck driver and become a regional or national player? If those are things that you want to do and you just haven't you're having problems with accessing cash flow, the secret is building company credit on the tax number, that EIN number, and getting out of the personal guarantee and the personal inquiry game.
No, it makes sense. So, well, thank you for those several stories that illustrates it. So how does J Gault come into the picture? What's y'all's role in helping these companies other than education? I'm sure there's more to it than that. How does your service work?
We're a SaaS company, which stands for software as a service. So we have a robust platform that has 7-step blueprint inside of it that walks you step by step. But more importantly, we have a white glove concierge service, kind of a do it for you, but there's certain things you have to do. We can't use your bank lines of credit, your credit cards, and your retail. You don't want me to do that in your business, but we help you fix blemishes, where to go to fix them. So we provide a coaching service that goes behind the SaaS platform so you're successful in your journey. So imagine getting a dedicated coach. They're not out of the Philippines or India. That's great for customer service, I think, right? All of our credit analysts and our finance analysts, we have a whole back office advising team that helps our members. So we are a membership. Okay. So there's a one-time fee that you would pay. And when you come into that, you get lifetime support from Gault through our SaaS product of getting business credit. So you'll have access to all of the corporate lenders and vendors that actually report. And our secret sauce is we won't work with you or put them in our business finance suite unless they report to the credit bureaus. That'll help you build a robust profile and credit. And if they don't show us the underwriting guidelines, because it's important to know what boxes must be checked before you apply for a loan. Because in the corporate vending and lending world, if you get denied, you have to wait 6 to 12 months before you can reapply. And that can really slow down momentum when you're trying to grow a business. So that's not how consumer credit works, but that's how corporate credit works. So we have that. We also help with cash flow management. We really define ourselves as cash flow management experts, getting you access and leveraging banks' money at better rates and terms, understanding cash flow so you don't get into expense or debt trouble, and then giving you a business valuation, David. This is the power. 98% of small business owners have never had a business valuation or appraisal done. So in their head and heart, they know what their company's worth, but you'll know exactly what it's worth, how to insure it properly, and where to invest your time. You'll get clear, sound facts about your company so you can invest your dollars and your time in the right parts to continue to grow the asset that you're building and properly protecting it, allowing you to do what? Plan for an exit strategy. And those are typically $10,000 on average. We provide that every year to our members with J Gault. So we're really here with our 3 columns of getting corporate financing, access to lenders and vendors that report, understanding your cash flow management as you grow and scale, and then having your business evaluation so you know the value, where to invest in it, and to plan and know exactly if you want to sell it, when is the time to restructure, when is the time to sell it, or if you're passing it down to one of your kids to run, eventually you want to make it a generational company. Now you'll have corporate credit built where they can walk into the seat. You can ride off into your retirement years and know that the corporate funding is going to be there for generations to come. So the legacy you can leave behind by building that company will be passed on to generations, your kids, the grandkids, and so forth and so on.
No, it sounds great. So what should people do as their next step if they're interested in learning more? Go to the website. What's kind of your first entry point for potential new customers?
I would highly recommend that you do that. David, I'm fine with you sharing for your audience. Depends on how big that audience is. My personal, but I would go to jgault.io. That's JGALT, no period, just jgault.io. And then you can check out our services and what we do. And if there's more questions, there's a place where you can connect and have a private consultation if this is something you want to talk more about.
Okay. That sounds great. And that's jgault.io.
Yes.
Okay. What as we're wrapping up here, is there anything I didn't ask you that you wish I had asked you?
Wow, that's a great question. You did a great job. I mean, obviously, I can understand why you have a successful podcast out there, David.
Well, you're too
Um,
nice.
oh, no worries. I mean, you've been doing this a long time. The only thing that I would share with American entrepreneurs out there today is we're really passionate. And just me as an owner, my goal is not to sell something. I have 4 companies. The only reason why Cole, my partner, and I started J Gault was to serve and educate, but there's more than education. It's all about impact. So if there's something where you're wanting to grow an asset and you want to get there, we're here to have a intelligent conversation, a consultation, if you will, about where you're at, where you're wanting to go. And about 80% you didn't ask this. So does everybody want J Gault? Of course, we're going to think everybody needs J Gault, right? It's our company. Same thing with yours, David. I'm sure you feel the same way. If you're exporting products, you won't find a better guy, right? Outside
Sure.
of the country. So we're really great at what we do, but only about 80% of the companies we talk to every week take advantage of J Gault services
Okay.
because it's not for everyone. So it depends on where you're at and what you're trying to accomplish. That's why we're kind of looking at ourselves as the doctors of business credit. It doesn't make sense for everyone. It may not make sense today, or it may not make sense at all. If you're just
Okay.
have a side hustle or something in your house that you're just doing is just to make some additional income to pay off debt or something like that. We're truly looking at companies that are looking to grow and scale and, really be disruptors like us in the product or the services that they're offering across the United States.
Awesome. Well, thank you for adding to that. So as we wrap up, that's Jerry Vaughn with J Gault, jgault.io. Jerry, this has really been fun, and I think there's a lot of great value that your company provides for small to medium sized privately held companies. So I really appreciate you taking time to come on the show and share some information.
Yeah, you're very welcome. It was a pleasure to be on it, David. So thank you so much again for having me on.
Oh, my pleasure.